seen you. And so here we are, we're back. And the reason we're back, you thought you could get rid of me with Thanksgiving break, but no, I'm still here. It is time for the 30-30 challenge. I need a theme song, a 30-30 challenge theme song. If any of you at home want to write me a 30-30 challenge theme song, maybe I will incorporate it into this, like this is the 30 challenge. I think that was My Price is Right, or one of those ones. Anyways, here's what we're talking about today. Last week, I neglected to make a video. Can I tell you why? It's Thanksgiving week. I had family in town. It was crazy. It was busy. There you go. Not a really good excuse, but still a valid one, I guess. Here's what I want you to look at, though. So this is week one for December. So if you're just joining us now, I would love for you to get the Cornerstones book. If you've got family at home, grandmas, grandpas, kids, or parents with kids, young kids, buy that book. Have it for before Christmas, but use this as great conversation starter. So here's the deal, guys. I'm combining last week's and this week because I can, but also because it's kind of monotonous. If you've gotten to this point with me and you've tracked along, we're in the next set of pages. We're in the part where we're just talking about creation, right? So some of the questions, and we've mentioned this in our Bible study group called Recap that we meet on Wednesday nights as parents. We've mentioned that we've kind of hit some times where it seems kind of like, okay, what's going on here? It kind of seems like some of the questions are similar, right? That they kind of ask the same thing. So one of the things is you might feel like over the next couple weeks that things are not as deep as you want it to be. So like, hey, if you're in this page with me, we're talking about like, what did God create on the first day? What did he create on the second day? What did he create on the third day? What did he create on the fourth day and the fifth day, the sixth day, and what did he do on the seventh day, right? So that's stuff that, it's like, okay, what am I doing? Let me just say this. Don't blow through that. I want you to know that I think it's a useful tool. Some of it, it's not as much. Like if you have the parent guide like me, you would just see that there's not a ton there to deal with. So here's what I would say. What I would say is let's do this. Let's go through these days and let's make it a challenge to get your kids to learn what those days are, right? So a couple things I would say is, first off, challenge your kids to learn the 6 days of what things were created, and then be able to fire those back. I tell my kids all the time, like I even in my class that I teach at the college level, I still require all my students to know the days. And think about it for just a moment. Like, do you know the order that all the creation days come in? So, like, first you have light, you got the atmosphere, you've got dry ground and tree and vegetation. On the fourth day, he talks about the two great lights in the sky and the stars in the sky, so the sun and the moon and the stars. You've got the fifth day of all the sea creatures and the birds. And then on the sixth day, you've got the land animals and people. And on the seventh day is rest. So instead of just doing it like this for this week and last week and just kind of saying, okay, what did he do? Okay, great, you got that. Why don't you press a little bit? So if you have older kids and if you're an adult watching this, here's what I want you to do is really think about these things. Like, okay, why and how, if we have light created on day one, do we then seem that he takes his attention to day 4 to make the sun? Like, I thought the sun gave light, right? Like, that seems interesting. And that ever bothered you? Ever thought about that one? What I would do is I would, if you got older kids, challenge them to think through some of this stuff. What's at play in these creation stories? So don't just say, okay, what's day 4? What's day 2? Because that's the questions I'm asking you right now. And when I make another video like this in a year, we've cycled through, I'm going to do the same thing. But challenge you to go dig a little deeper. Push back. I know, so if you've got some older kids, you're probably going to be dealing with the fact that, yeah, what do you think about day 4? Why is it that these are here? What do you think about with the creation of animals and people, and push back on some of the stuff maybe that they're learning in class that might seem to be contrary to what the Bible says? But here's another thing I want you to do. I want this to be a springboard for going further into a study in Genesis with your family. So, what I would say is, if maybe you don't feel that confident in some of those apologetic questions, and when I say apologetics, I mean, how does the Bible root and how does the Bible relate to the world around? Like those questions, like we were asking, like, how is it that you have sun and moon and stars on day 4 and yet light was day 1? Like, what's that all about? I would say go to a place like Answers in Genesis. So if you look up and Google Answers in Genesis, guys, I think there's a wealth of resources here for you. And so I think this is a good place to be. Answers in Genesis has a ton of good stuff. In fact, we've got 2 Answers in Genesis books that my family, my parents, I think my in-laws both did it. We've got 2 different books for our kids. And actually this week we have supplemented some of the stuff, because it just so happens that a lot of that stuff that those books were given are kind of going in line with what we have here. So I think that's something to look at. Use Answers in Genesis. I would also say that if your kids are a little bit older and you want to explore maybe some variety within evangelical perspective, I would look at Reasons to Believe. Reasons to Believe they're an old earth group, but very solid, good people. They're based out of Covina, California. Do a lot with college ministries. But I would say, look into some of these organizations, these ones that are seeking to integrate, what we see in the text with the world around us. Both of those groups, I would say, are strong groups to look at. I lean towards the Answers in Genesis stuff because I tend to be, I view myself more in terms of that young earth 6th day. But I like what I see from the Reasons to Believe guys. So I think it's worth exploring, because maybe you've got a kid who's struggling with Age of the Earth and they don't like those. Well, why don't you look at least maybe what maybe the full kind of spectrum is out there right now in evangelical scholarship that would say, okay, hey, well, we can have that conversation. We can talk about that a little bit. If you YouTube both Answers in Genesis or Reasons to Believe, and I'll put the link in here if I can. Both of those are going to have some really good stuff for your family to look at and ask questions about how these days relate and how these creation things relate to the world around. So look into that, dig a little bit deeper. So go past God created, the atmosphere. God created the sun and moon and stars. Go past those 2 big questions. Seek to kind of supplement. Use some time this week, maybe dig a little deeper. Or if you've got really young kids, just see if they can memorize the order and then talk about those and about how God made all of those, and maybe try to point out during the day some of those things that you see in those creation days. Like, can I just say this? One thing we've done recently is, if you read the passage in Genesis on the moon and the stars, is I'm talking to the kids about a lunar calendar. And that's really a fascinating thing to do, is because you look and then we point to our calendar. You can say, look, we're at full moon here, and the moon is kind of half, and then none, and then half again. And you're talking about the cycle that a moon gets to see, and you get to see that. And so it's kind of fun stuff to look at, that these mark the times and the seasons as we see in the text. So think of ways to connect those things to the world around. If you want to go deeper, look at some of those sites, Answers in Genesis, Reasons to Believe. I think those are both good ones to dig into that I would have no problem sending any of my church people to look at, because I know both of those camps fairly well. They don't agree, but I think they're both solidly Christian, and come to different conclusions, kind of what they see with the science around. Hey, that's all I'm going to show you for now. God bless you guys. We'll talk to you a little bit later.